At my son's birthday picnic, I heard my daughter-in-law whisper, "She's not necessary here." I didn't react. I didn't interrupt. I just paid attention. Because in that moment, I understood something simple. This wasn't about one comment. It was about control. And I decided I'd take my house, my space, and my life back quietly. We were at the family picnic celebrating my son David's birthday. The sun was shining, and the air was filled with laughter and the smell of grilling burgers. Everyone seemed happy, at least on the surface. My daughter-in-law Sarah was as usual taking charge, bustling about, directing people and ensuring everything went exactly her way. I found a spot on the fringe, observing comfortable in my silence. My late wife Martha would have been right in the middle organizing, but that wasn't me. Then I heard it, clear as day. Sarah was huddled with some friends, her back partly turned to me. She must have thought I was out of earshot. "Why did David bring her?" she hissed, nodding towards an older woman, a longtime friend of Martha's, sitting quietly nearby. "She's so unnecessary." My heart hammered against my ribs, not in rage, but in a cold, stark realization. It wasn't just the dismissive comment about a family friend. It was the ownership. Sarah was implying this picnic was hers, and she dictated who belonged. David, typically passive, just stood by, avoiding eye contact. I didn't argue. I didn't correct her. I didn't even flinch. I just noted the dynamic, the complete lack of respect for my late wife's friend, and by extension, for me. This wasn't her house, nor was this her family dynamic to dictate. The picnic was on my property. At my invitation, though, she'd clearly taken over the execution. That comment, small in its delivery, was a giant neon sign. It wasn't an isolated event. It was a symptom of a larger takeover that I had been subtly ignoring, attributing to her enthusiasm. It was my house, my life, and my late wife's legacy she was steamrolling over. I wasn't just going to let it happen anymore. The next chapter would be very different. The seed of a plan, a simple, non-confrontational plan, had been planted. Back home, the silence felt different. Usually I found comfort in the quiet, a remnant of a life built with Martha. But now it felt laced with the echo of Sarah's dismissive tone. I walked through the rooms of my own house, a place I had lived in for over 40 years, and I started seeing things differently. The kitchen, once Martha's domain, had been entirely rearranged. Spices were labeled with a strange system I didn't understand. Pot lids were stacked in a way that defied all logic to me. I found a drawer of tools I'd kept handy, a screwdriver, a small wrench replaced with various specialized kitchen gadgets I'd never use. Sarah had helped by organizing, but it wasn't organization for me. In the living room, the armrest of my favorite chair, where I usually kept the TV remote, and a coaster, was bare. Sarah had decluttered, hiding them in a basket under the side table, requiring me to bend down every time. The photos of Martha on the mantelpiece had been moved slightly, pushed towards the back, to make room for a new, mass-produced ceramic decoration Sarah had bought. It wasn't malice, perhaps, but a total disregard for my space and routine. I went to the garage, my sanctuary. I had an old, worn-down but comfortable workbench, where I did minor repairs and woodworking. My collection of hand tools was meticulously laid out. No, they weren't. They had been sorted into new plastic bins hidden away. My project, a simple birdhouse I was building, was shoved under a tarp in the corner. It wasn't just the objects. It was the slow, methodical erosion of my presence. The next time they came over, they wouldn't just be visiting my house. They'd be in a place they were slowly claiming as their own. I wouldn't stop them, not with words. But the conditions of that claim were about to change. I didn't need to shout to be heard. I just needed to act. That afternoon, I picked up a pad and paper. I wasn't making a checklist of grievances. I was making a map of my life, a map that I had unintentionally allowed others to rewrite. I started with the house. I owned it free and clear. I paid the taxes, the insurance, and all the utilities. Up until now, I had allowed David and Sarah to treat it like an extension of their own. They popped in, used the kitchen, parked their car in the driveway, and left me with the mess and the bill. No more. I made a new set of rules, concise and clear. I started by listing the things I'd changed back. The remote was back on the armrest. The tools were back on the workbench. The photos of Martha were prominent again. This wasn't about being stubborn. It was about regaining possession of my own home, one small object at a time. Next, I looked at the finances. For years, I had quietly supplemented David's and Sarah's expenses. A few hundred here for a car repair, a significant contribution to their last vacation, paying for dinners whenever we were out. It had been my way of helping my son, but it had created a sense of dependency and implicitly a feeling that my money was their money. I decided to stop. I wasn't going to make a dramatic announcement. When the next request for financial help inevitably came, the answer would simply be no without detailed explanation. I was redefining the boundary between family support and a handout, a boundary they had conveniently ignored. And finally, the garage. It was my space. I made a clear sign and taped it to the door: "Private workshop, do not displace contents." It was direct, unambiguous, and non-negotiable. I didn't need to argue with Sarah about where I kept my screwdrivers. I just needed to set a clear boundary. The easy access they had taken for granted was about to change. The first test came sooner than expected. The weekend arrived, and with it, the familiar sound of David's sedan pulling into my driveway. I was in the kitchen carefully replacing the new kitchen gadgets back in the drawers Sarah had cleared and restoring my old preferred setup. Sarah walked in, brimming with her usual energy, which now felt more like a calculated assertion of dominance. David trailed behind her carrying a bag from a hardware store. "Hi, Pop," Sarah chirped. "David's going to quickly use the garage. We need to cut some plywood for the new shelf we're putting in." She didn't ask. She stated it as a fact. I didn't look up from the kitchen drawer. "The garage is unavailable," I said calmly. She froze. "Excuse me, David just needs the saw, Pop. It won't take long." "The garage is my private workshop," I said, finally turning to meet her gaze. "And it's currently occupied." David looked uncomfortable. Sarah's face flushed. "Occupied? What are you doing in there?" "We just need to use the table saw. I am currently working on a project." I lied smoothly. "And as the sign on the door says, it's a private workshop." Sarah stared at me, her mouth slightly open. "A sign? You put a sign, Pop? Don't be ridiculous. This is family." "Yes," I agreed. "And this is my house." She looked at David, expecting him to intervene. He shuffled his feet. "Pop, it'll just be a few minutes, honestly." I just held my ground. "The answer is no. David, the garage is closed." Sarah scoffed, grabbed David's arm and marched out. "Fine. We'll go to Home Depot and use their services. This is ridiculous." I watched them drive away. The saw, of course, was mine. But the space, the tools, the ability to grant access, that was also mine. And I had just firmly reclaimed it. The us versus them boundary was getting clearer by the hour. This was just the beginning. A week later, I received the monthly utility bill. It was significantly higher than usual. After analyzing it, I realized a large chunk came from the increased heating and electricity costs due to David and Sarah's frequent visits. They often left lights on the back door open and ran appliances indiscriminately. Again, I didn't argue. I didn't point it out to them. I went online and paid the bill as I always did, but I made a slight change. Until now, I had kept a shared coffee maker that David and Sarah often used on their visits, sometimes cleaning it, sometimes not. They'd often make themselves coffee and then leave the half-empty pot sitting, or use the last of the expensive coffee grounds I'd bought. I bought a single-cup Keurig machine for myself. I placed my old standard coffee maker and the shared bag of grounds in the back of a cabinet out of sight. My new setup was for my use only. When they came over next, Sarah immediately headed towards the kitchen counter where the coffee maker used to be. "Pop, where's the coffee maker? I want to make a pot." "I got myself a new machine," I said, pointing to the Keurig. "Oh," she looked at it confused. "Where's the other one?" "Stored away." She stared at the Keurig. "But what am I supposed to use? I can't just make a single cup." I was already on the third page of my book. I didn't answer right away. I let the silence hang there heavy and intentional. This wasn't about the coffee maker. It was about the expectation of hospitality and access that I had slowly allowed them to claim. "Well," I said finally, not looking up, "you're welcome to use the Keurig if you have some of the pods." I knew they didn't. She huffed. "You're making everything so difficult, Pop. Why did you change everything?" "I made a simple change that works better for me," I said, my voice even. "This is my home and I'm organizing it for my convenience." Sarah walked away, frustrated. She understood. I wasn't just withholding coffee. I was withdrawing the implicit, open invitation to treat my house as an extension of hers. And she was beginning to feel the walls around her self-granted privileges closing in. The space they occupied was shrinking. The subtle pushback continued. I had a dinner date with them at their favorite Italian restaurant. In the past, I had almost reflexively paid the check, seeing it as my contribution to our family time. This evening, when the waiter placed the bill in the center of the table, I just let it sit. I made small talk with David about his car, which I had recently noticed had new tires. I remarked on how expensive those tires must have been. "Oh yeah," he said, shifting in his seat. "The old ones were shot." We finished our meal. The silence after the check arrived was palpable. Sarah looked at me expectantly. David fiddled with his napkin. I slowly stood up. "That was a lovely meal," I said, pulling out my wallet. "Here is my share." I placed cash on the table, carefully calculated for my order and tip. David's face fell. Sarah looked stunned. "Pop," Sarah began, her voice strained. "What about the rest?" "I'm sure you two can handle your portion," I said, putting my wallet back. "It was wonderful to see you." I turned and began walking out. I could feel their eyes burning into my back. This wasn't about the cost of the meal. It was about breaking a pattern of quiet enablement. I had been paying for their company, for the privilege of being their father, and in doing so I had inadvertently allowed them to see me as a source of funds, rather than a person with his own needs and finances. On the way home, I realized something else. My car, which David frequently borrowed to run errands or even just to have a second vehicle, was nearly empty of gas. I had been subsidizing not just their meals, but their daily transportation. I immediately drove to the gas station. When I filled up, I didn't use the shared family credit card, but my personal debit card. And more importantly, I decided that the days of lending my car with no questions asked were over. The access was tightening. The boundaries were becoming firmer. They were beginning to lose more than just a free meal. They were losing control. The next phase of my quiet reclamation involved the digital and the mobile. My home Wi-Fi had, for a long time, been the backup internet for both David and Sarah. Whenever their signal was weak or they just wanted the security of a backup, they would connect to mine. They knew the password by heart, a shared secret I had casually given. The monthly bill had shown an unexplained surge in data usage, which I traced back to the repeated connections from their various devices. They weren't just using it occasionally. They were using it almost constantly, sometimes even streaming when they were just outside the house. I went online to my router settings and simply changed the network name and password. No grand speech, no explanation, just a couple of keystrokes. When they arrived for their next visit, the frustration was immediate. "Pop, the Wi-Fi's not working," Sarah grumbled, tapping on her phone. "Did you restart the router?" "The network has been updated," I said, reading the newspaper. "Updated? What's the new password?" I didn't immediately answer. I turned the page. "I'm using it for my personal work right now," I said finally, "and I need the bandwidth. It's a private network." Her jaw tightened. "Private, Pop? You're our father. We're family." "Yes," I said, "and this is my personal network." They were left without internet access, visibly frustrated. It was another layer of convenience I had removed. The second change was more tangible. My car keys. Until now, they had been kept on a hook by the back door, easily accessible. David had a spare key that I had given him for emergencies, which had turned into casual, unspoken ownership. I took the keys off the hook and put them in my pocket. The spare key, which I knew David kept on his own key ring, would no longer open the car. I had gone to the dealership and had the keyless entry codes changed for both my key and a new spare I kept in a lockbox. When they left, Sarah glanced at the empty hook. "David needs to take your car to get those errands done tomorrow." "He can't use my car," I said. Sarah whipped around. "Why not? He always uses it." "I have appointments all day," I said, not looking up. "My car will be in use." "Appointments all day? Since when?" "My schedule is not your concern, Sarah." I said, my voice firm. "The answer is no." The look of pure, impotent rage on her face was worth the price of the key reprogramming. I was no longer just the silent bystander. I was the one pulling the strings. The tension in the air was thick during their next few visits. The atmosphere was one of silent recrimination, but I met it with my own tranquil resolve. I wasn't just changing rules. I was changing the way I interacted. I stopped initiating conversations. I stopped offering opinions on their lives, not that they had ever truly asked. I answered their questions with concise, factual statements. "Is everything okay, Pop?" David finally asked, his voice hesitant during a particularly silent dinner. "Everything is precisely as it should be," I said. Sarah rolled her eyes. "This is getting so weird. It's like you're trying to, I don't know, exclude us from your life." "I am living my life, Sarah," I replied, cutting a piece of chicken. "And I am asking that you respect the boundaries of that life. Respect. We've done everything for you. I organized your kitchen. David fixed that leaky faucet." "You organized my kitchen to suit your preferences," I corrected her. "And David fixed the faucet after I asked 3 times, and you both have used my car, my tools, my utilities, and my money on numerous occasions, without question or offer to repay. My boundaries are not a request, Sarah. They are a statement of fact." I didn't wait for a response. I finished my meal and placed my dishes in the sink. "You know," Sarah said, her voice dripping with sarcasm, "if you're so miserable having us around, maybe we should just stop coming." I looked at her. "That is entirely your decision to make," I said, my voice steady. A week later, I went to a local sign shop and ordered a customized, weathered wooden sign. It looked like an antique for sale sign, but was inscribed with a single large red letter P. When they arrived, they stopped in their tracks. "A for sale sign," Sarah gasped. "Are you selling the house?" "I'm selling my presence," I said, walking towards the sign and leaning it against my favorite oak tree. "This isn't just about the house anymore. It's about who controls the life within it. And the answer is me." The sign was symbolic, a clear marker of the boundary I had drawn. I wasn't just changing my habits. I was changing my entire approach. My house was no longer a communal asset they could exploit. It was my home, and the terms of their involvement were now entirely mine to dictate. The custom-ordered sign with its singular mysterious red P stood against the oak tree for 2 weeks. It was a visible reminder of the new dynamic I had established. And during that time, something strange began to happen. David and Sarah stopped coming over as frequently. When they did, they were quieter, more respectful. The casual assumed ownership was gone. They asked for things rather than taking them. Sarah stopped commenting on my kitchen organization. David stopped trying to use the garage. The atmosphere was less confrontational, but also colder. The easy comfort, however false, had evaporated, and then came the moment that truly tested the new reality. Sarah, on one of their increasingly rare visits, announced, "Pop, you've been so distant. We've been thinking, since you don't seem to want us around much, and since the sign is up, Chidiai, maybe we should start looking for our own place." I didn't answer right away. I let the silence hang there, just like I had with the coffee maker, the Wi-Fi password, and the dinner check. This wasn't a sudden, impulsive decision. This was the culmination of everything. I was no longer the pushover, the quiet enabler. I was the one who controlled my life. I looked from Sarah to David, who was studiously avoiding eye contact. I think that is an excellent decision, I said finally, my voice calm and clear. It seems we are all ready for some space. Sarah's face went white. She had expected pushback, perhaps some pleading or an emotional declaration of family unity. Instead, she got agreement. A calm, rational, and definitive agreement. "You're not even going to fight us on this?" she stammered. "There is nothing to fight, Sarah," I said. "This is a logical and necessary progression for all of us. You need to build your own life, and I need to live mine." The announcement was over, the decision made. The next few weeks were a flurry of activity, them searching for an apartment, me, without a word of protest, starting to reclaim my space. They left, not in a fit of rage, but in a quiet, inevitable departure that I had orchestrated through weeks of subtle, targeted actions. I was no longer just the owner of my house. I was truly and completely the master of my own life. The day David and Sarah moved into their new apartment was a quiet affair. They hadn't asked for my help, and I hadn't offered it. I had given David back his spare key to my car, the original unreprogrammed one, just to make a point, and I watched them load their final boxes into a U-Haul van they had rented. They said a polite but perfunctory goodbye. No hugs, no declarations of love, just a simple, "We'll be in touch." I watched them drive away. The house was mine again. Not just in a legal sense, but in the everyday, felt it in my bones kind of way. I walked through the quiet rooms. The remote was on the armrest. The coffee maker was on the counter. The tools were in the garage. The photos of Martha were prominent. I didn't need to check. They had stopped trying to move things. I went to the garage, unlocked it, and picked up the birdhouse project I had been working on weeks ago. The smell of sawdust was comforting. The workshop felt like mine. The sign with the single red P was gone. I had taken it down and stored it away. I didn't need it as a visible barrier anymore. The barriers were in the respect I had reclaimed, the finances I had secured, the space I had redefined. The relationship with my son was strained, that much was true. The silence between us, once filled with unspoken affection, now held the weight of unexpressed recriminations. But it was a real relationship, not a convenient arrangement. Any reconciliation that might happen would be on real terms, built on mutual respect and understanding of my boundaries. I wasn't a hero in this story, nor a villain. I was just an older man, a father, who had spent a lifetime building a simple, orderly life, and who in a moment of quiet insight had recognized that the life was being slowly eroded. I didn't fight with words. I didn't use the legal system. I simply acted. I took back my keys, my money, my space, and my dignity. And as I sat in my quiet living room that evening, sipping coffee from my single-cup Keurig, I realized that I hadn't just reclaimed my life. I had taught my son and his wife a powerful and lasting lesson about respect. The silence was golden, but it was a strength I had earned one deliberate action at a time. I was alone, yes, but I was also finally truly in my own home. Respect doesn't disappear all at once. It's taken slowly when you keep allowing access. So I stopped allowing it. No arguments, no explanations, just decisions. And once I did, everything shifted back where it belonged.